Welcome back, everybody. And now, the thrilling conclusion of my conversation with a man I now feel comfortable calling Mr. Spielberg.
Over to some entertainment news now. Four-time Oscar-winning filmmaker Steven Spielberg.
If there were an Academy Award category Best Producer and/or Director of Money-Making Movies, Steven Spielberg...
Tell us the secret about Steven Spielberg. He eats babies. Cold babies. 15-year-old in a relationship with a 27-year-old.
Wait, what?
But even that was quite conversational, and that wasn't sort of like saying, oh my God, you're never gonna... It was just...
FBI is hunting down Steven Spielberg after Julia Roberts allegedly calls him out, shaking Hollywood to its core.
I find him to be, unfortunately, not as good at remembering the time that we spent together.
The information Julia's leaking is nothing short of disturbing, with shocking details linking Spielberg to Diddy's explosive situation.
Names are going to come out. Sean will talk. That's why Jay-Z is running. That's why Jay-Z is nervous.
And if he's connected to Diddy, we might be looking at some deeply hidden secrets, and even serious crimes. What exactly did Julia uncover? And how far does this dark trail really go? Let's find out. Word on the street is she's spilled some serious tea that might land this iconic director in big trouble. Remember that January court shocker when a list of names linked to Jeffrey Epstein slipped out of Manhattan?
Newly released court documents relating to the Jeffrey Epstein. They include associates, friends, and alleged victims of the disgraced billionaire who died in jail 5 years ago.
Let's just say the list had a few major players, and with Diddy now locked up, it looks like Spielberg might be in line for a good dose of scrutiny himself. And if you know Julia, you know she's not one to dodge the drama. Her latest comments have everyone wondering just how deep this whole thing goes. There's been a crazy buzz about Spielberg possibly being tied to Epstein's scandals, and naturally the internet went wild. Some fans couldn't believe Spielberg would be involved, while others were like, why not? No one's untouchable. The debates flared up for days before eventually cooling off. But now Julia Roberts has jumped right back into the fire. She's dropped some major tea fans have been dying to know, and trust me, it's got jaws dropping. So what exactly did Julia spill about Spielberg, and how does it link to their years-long feud? Julia Roberts and Steven Spielberg are practically the poster kids for a classic Hollywood feud.
I know more about, him and his life and Amy Irving and what have you than I probably said about my own life.
These two have been going at it since they wrapped up Hook in the late 80s. Spielberg had a lot to say about Roberts' attitude on set, calling her out for being difficult to work with and not always taking direction well. But there was more to it than just work drama. Julia was dealing with a whole mess in her personal life, too. At the time, she was in a rocky relationship with her co-star Kiefer Sutherland. They were actually engaged and planned to get married just a day after Hook finished filming. But things took a turn when Julia found out Kiefer was cheating on her, and she ended up canceling the wedding altogether.
It wasn't what she wanted to do in the end. And I think it took a lot of courage, in amongst all of that other stuff, to be able to say, I can't do this.
Spielberg could totally tell that Julia's messy relationship with Kiefer was affecting her vibe on set, and he didn't hold back in an interview with 60 Minutes. He straight up said, it was not a great time for Julia and I to be working together. That comment really hit Julia hard. She had confided in him on set and was genuinely trying to keep things professional, so hearing him say that felt like a major betrayal. In a Vanity Fair interview, she clapped back, saying she was shocked that he didn't have her back when people started calling her difficult to work with. I saw that and my eyes popped out of my head. I couldn't believe someone I trusted would actually hesitate to defend me, she said, even calling him a turncoat. Later on, in another interview, she threw a bit more shade, saying Spielberg had a pretty foggy and unreliable memory of what really went down on that set in the late 80s.
Steven Spielberg, I find quite confused in his recollection of me.
With the drama already brewing between these two Hollywood icons, it was no surprise when a journalist eventually asked Julia Roberts what she thought about Steven Spielberg's name supposedly popping up on the Epstein list. You know how reporters are. They can't resist a chance to dig for more juicy details, especially when it comes to celeb drama. So when Spielberg's name entered the mix, they went straight to Julia for her reaction, and she didn't hold back. Julia threw in some serious shade, suggesting that Spielberg might have some dark and creepy interests, way beyond anything he's put on the big screen.
I'm not even going to talk about Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is a...
The resurfaced pre-production notes from Indiana Jones have certainly sparked some intense reactions, as they reveal a rather unsettling brainstorming session among Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Lawrence Kasdan. The documents detail their discussion of Indiana Jones's backstory, and the ideas exchanged are troubling. At one point, George Lucas suggests a storyline where Indiana has a past with a young girl, initially pitched as a character who had met Jones when she was around 11 and later rekindled a romantic connection. As they debated the character's age, Lucas mentioned the possibility of a strange relationship, and both he and Spielberg went back and forth on making her slightly older, considering 15 as the ideal age to keep a certain edge to the storyline. The conversation even veered into how the young girl could have been the one to initiate things with Jones. These notes have understandably raised concerns about the creative choices and attitudes in Hollywood during that time, and fans are grappling with this disconcerting backstory surrounding a beloved character. The three men went back and forth over the matter, with one suggesting that the girl should rather be the one throwing herself at Jones than the other way around. They even considered bumping up the age to around 15 years, but not further than that, or the story could lose its edge. They explained that 15 was the best age to peg the girl, and that when she last met Indiana Jones, she came on strongly to him, and the two engaged their carnal desires. A lot of fans were totally grossed out when they found out about how messed up Spielberg and his crew were during the early days of Indiana Jones. Like, seriously, who thought it was cool to make a young girl hook up with an older guy just to make the movie edgier? But hey, it's Hollywood, right? That place where all the shady stuff happens, where big shots use young, eager talents to satisfy their creepy cravings. It's messed up. When fans found out about this hair-raising detail from Indiana Jones, their reaction was something like this.
15-year-old in a relationship with a 27-year-old.
Some fans think it's just art and doesn't really reflect the personal lives of these guys, which could totally be true. But let's be real, movies often mirror society, right? So maybe Spielberg and his crew were into some weird stuff that crept into their films. If you think Spielberg's thing with young characters and older ones was just a one-time deal, think again. There's talk that during Jurassic Park, he got pretty close with Ariana Richards. Apparently, he sent her caregiver away so they could have some alone time in her hotel room, supposedly to go over lines. Sources say that Spielberg put her in some uncomfortable situations that really messed with her head. That first night was just the beginning of a series of bizarre encounters, with Spielberg allegedly taking advantage of Richards. She's been in therapy for years and won't talk about the movie or do interviews. It seems like she's completely done with Hollywood and wants nothing to do with any Spielberg tributes. After Jurassic Park, she did a few more films but eventually bounced from Hollywood for good. Now she's a painter, finding peace and expression through her art. Maybe that's her way of coping through therapy.
I get really inspired to paint portraiture, I would say, is my very favorite thing.
Ariana left acting to escape years of mistreatment from industry gatekeepers who really should have known better. One of those figures was Polish director Roman Palansky, who happens to be friends with Spielberg. Not to jump to conclusions, but you know how they say, birds of a feather flock together. Palansky, like Spielberg, has a pretty troubling history with accusations about inappropriate behavior towards young women. Back on March 10, 1977, Palansky, who was 43 at the time, got arrested in LA on multiple charges involving Samantha Gailey, now Geimer, who was just 13 years old. The charges included unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor, sodomy, lewd acts on a child under 14, and providing a controlled substance to a minor. He initially pleaded not guilty to everything, but later he took a plea deal that led to the more serious charges getting dropped in exchange for a guilty plea to unlawful intercourse with a minor.
Yeah, when he wanted to get into jacuzzi, I knew I was in trouble. Like, wait, this is not what he's supposed to be doing.
After undergoing a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation and being placed on probation, Roman Palansky fled from justice in February 1978. He left the United States for England and subsequently France, just hours before his scheduled sentencing. Palansky has since resided mainly in France and has avoided traveling to countries where he might face extradition to the United States. On March 10, 1977, Roman Palansky faced 6 charges related to the of 13-year-old Samantha Jane Gailey, now Samantha Geimer. The charges included unlawful intercourse with a female under 18, by use of drugs, perversion, sodomy, lewd, and lascivious acts upon a child under 14, and furnishing a controlled substance to a minor. Eventually, Palansky pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of unlawful intercourse with a minor. According to Geimer's testimony to the grand jury, Palansky had asked her mother, a television actress and model, if he could photograph Geimer for the French edition of Vogue, which he was guest editing. Her mother agreed to a private photo shoot. Geimer later testified that she felt uncomfortable during the first session, where she posed topless at Palansky's request, and was hesitant to participate in a second shoot, but ultimately agreed. This second shoot took place at actor Jack Nicholson's home in the Mulholland area of Los Angeles. At the time of the crime, Nicholson was away on a ski trip in Colorado. His girlfriend, Angelica Houston, was there but had left the house, only to return while Palansky and Geimer were still inside. Geimer recalled that Houston became suspicious of what was happening behind the closed bedroom door and started banging on it, but left when Palansky assured her they were just finishing up the photo shoot. Geimer later said, "We did photos with me drinking champagne. Toward the end, it got a little scary, and I realized he had other intentions. I knew I was not where I should be, but I just didn't quite know how to get myself out of there." In a 2003 interview, she recalled that she began to feel uncomfortable after he asked her to lie down on a bed and described how she attempted to resist. "I said, no, I don't want to go in there. No, I don't want to do this. No. And then I didn't know what else to do," she stated, adding, "We were alone and I didn't know what else would happen if I made a scene. So I was just scared, and after giving some resistance, I figured, well, I guess I'll get to come home after this." Geimer testified that Palansky provided champagne that they shared as well as part of a lewd, and despite her protests, he performed OS on her and penetrated her both vaginally and anally, each time after being told no and being asked to stop. Describing the event in his autobiography, Palansky stated that he did not drug Geimer, that she wasn't unresponsive, and that she did not respond negatively when he inquired as to whether or not she was enjoying what he was doing. The 28-page probation report submitted to the court by Kenneth Fair, his parole officer, and signed by Deputy Irwin Gold, excused his behavior due to his creative genius and being an immigrant from a land with different morals, placed some of the blame on the victim and her mother, and concluded by saying that there was evidence that the victim was not only physically mature, but willing. The officer's report also quoted two psychiatrists' denial of Palansky being a P, or S deviant. Claiming to protect Geimer from going through a trial, her attorney arranged a plea bargain. Palansky accepted, and as part of the agreement, the 5 initial charges were dismissed. Instead, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of engaging in unlawful intercourse with a minor. Under the terms of the plea deal, Roman Palansky was initially ordered to report to a state prison in California for a 90-day psychiatric evaluation. However, he was allowed to postpone this to finish filming a project in Europe. While he was in Europe working on the 1979 remake of Hurricane, he was spotted at Oktoberfest in 1977, surrounded by young girls and beer jars.
That's the moment. Then I realized something was wrong. I was frightened. I didn't know what to do, and I just knew then. It was like, oh, this guy, like, he wants to get his hands on me. Oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Palansky eventually returned to California and began his evaluation at Chino State Prison on December 19, 1977. He was released after just 42 days instead of the full 90. His lawyers were expecting probation at the sentencing hearing, especially since the probation officer, the examining psychiatrist, and even the victim all recommended prison time. However, on January 20th, 1978, Palansky was fired from his role as director of Hurricane. Regarding the proposed sentencing, Judge Lawrence J. Rittenband reportedly hinted to Palansky's attorneys that he intended to send the director to prison and order his deportation. According to the 2008 documentary Roman Palansky, Wanted and Desired, Deputy District Attorney David Wells showed Judge Rittenband photos of Palansky at a party in Munich with young girls, suggesting that Palansky wasn't taking the charges involving the 13-year-old seriously. This interaction would be classified as ex parte communication, since Wells was not officially part of the case, but had ties to the state of California. Faced with the looming threat of imprisonment and deportation, Palansky made the decision to flee the United States, heading to England and becoming a fugitive from justice. Regarding the proposed sentencing, Rittenband said, "On January 30th, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Gunson came to my chambers to discuss Palansky's psychiatric report. I told them that I had carefully read it and that I felt it was superficial, replete with many inaccuracies and factually unsupported conclusions, and was conspicuous more for what it failed to report than than what it did report. I believe I used the word whitewash. I stated that there was absolutely no mention in the report of any discussions which the counselors and psychiatrists at Chino had with Mr. Palansky relating to the serious and aggravated charges of by drugs and alcohol, sodomy, and oral copulation of the 13-year-old victim. I believe I pointed out to them that a statement in the report that throughout the experience with the victim, Mr. Palansky seems to have been unaware that he was involving himself in a criminal offense, an isolated instance of naivete, unusual in a mature, sophisticated man, was one of the most fatuous statements in a diagnostic report that I have ever read. I told Mr. Dalton that I did not propose to follow the recommendations, which were for straight probation without any additional time in custody. And the saddest part? All those Hollywood execs totally jumped to Roman Polanski's defense back in the day. At the time, most folks didn't really question why his colleagues were so eager to back him up. But with everything we know now about the darker side of Hollywood, it's clear why those big shots were so quick to fall all over themselves to support their buddy. Later, fans found out that the judge had actually planned to hit Palansky with a crazy 50-year sentence for his crimes. But after a little chat with Palansky's lawyer in chambers, the judge suddenly changed his mind. The lawyer spilled the beans to reporters, saying they were ready to slap him with that harsh sentence, instead of just going with the time served they had previously negotiated in the plea deal that the judge had agreed to. Feeling like the judge might bail on the plea deal and go for something tougher, Palansky decided to bounce. He told a friend about his escape plan, and just a day before his sentencing, he fled to London and then off to France, where he's been living ever since.
Roman Palansky got caught and he fled the country to avoid persecution. That's what happened, and he's been a fugitive ever since.
Many fans aren't really surprised by the accusations against Spielberg, especially with his ties to Palansky and that controversial pre-production meeting that led to a 15-year-old female character getting involved with an older guy in the film. It's not exactly a stretch to connect those dots, considering how movies often reflect real life and directors sometimes project their own fantasies onto their projects. Fans think this kind of behavior was probably more common among directors and execs back in the day. Take Thandie Newton's story, for example. She's opened up about her experiences of being objectified on a casting couch, which only adds to this whole vibe.
I was a 16-year-old, fresh from boarding school, going out into, on the casting couch. I was definitely objectified to an extreme.
Thandie also disclosed that she was manipulated deliberately when she was young and joined the industry. The incident happened when her father went to another country and she was alone. She said, "I was 16 and a virgin. I'd been psychologically G over weeks. I didn't fight him off. I was almost paralyzed with fear. It was SA." During an interview, she recalled another incident which took place when she was auditioning at the studio for the second time. In the meantime, she was asked to be a part of an indecent activity.
The director asked me to sit with my legs apart. The camera was right between, positioned where it could see up my skirt.
Thandie went on to say that during auditions, she was asked to sit in really uncomfortable positions. She recalled, "He asked me to put my leg over the arm of the chair and think about the character I was supposed to be having the dialogue with and how it felt to be made love to by this person. He was a director. I was still very young and thought it must be normal." Years later, when Thandie bumped into that same director at the Cannes Festival, she noticed him giving her a creepy smile that raised her suspicions. Intrigued, she did some digging and was shocked to learn that he had been secretly recording audition tapes and showing them to others in his home. This revelation not only explained his weird behavior toward her, but also shed light on a disturbing practice happening in the industry.
To show that video late at night to interested parties at his house.
Thandie Newton, famous for her roles in Line of Duty and Westworld, has been a strong advocate for raising awareness about the rampant issues of violence and racism in the entertainment industry. Throughout her career, she's bravely opened up about her own experiences and the immense pressure she felt to stay silent about them.
It's not about the person that's been abused. It's not just their role to say enough. It's about the people around. How much are the people that witness, how much are they perpetrators of the crime?
In another interview with British Vogue, Thandie explained how these deeply violent incidents have affected her both psychologically and physically. She said, "There's a moment where the ghost of me changed, and it was 16. He derailed me from myself utterly. I was traumatized. It was a kind of PTSD for sure. I was so distraught and appalled that a director had assaulted a young actress and that it was happening elsewhere with minors being abused. It was just messed up. I was basically waiting for someone to come along and say, well, what shall we do about this? Thandi revealed that after her assault, she struggled with eating disorders, using food control as a way to cope with her trauma. She reflected, I punished my body to try and find my heart. It's worth mentioning that while Spielberg wasn't directly accused of mistreating Ariana Richards, actor Crispin Glover, known for his role as George McFly in Back to the Future, did make allegations against Spielberg in 2003. Glover's book and subsequent film titled What Is It? Included claims suggesting Spielberg had a concerning interest in depicting young boys in compromising situations, which might reflect personal inclinations. Fans have speculated that directors often project their fantasies in disguised ways through their films, such as in the 1985 movie, possibly alluding to Spielberg's involvement. These discussions frequently point out how themes in cinema can blur the lines between fiction and reality.
Oh my God.
In one scene, a boy appears to be reattaching the broken pecker of a statue with an expression that definitely has suggestive undertones. Many fans have questioned why. Out of all things, it was the statue's pecker that got broken. They wondered why children would be subjected to these kinds of depictions when there are so many other ways to make the audience laugh. This is part of why Glover had an issue with Spielberg's alleged fixation on portraying boys in such questionable scenarios. There's even a clip where one of the boys has the pecker in his mouth after it broke off the statue, which just adds to the controversy.
Oh, look! It's not broken!
It often takes a long time for victims to gather the courage to speak out against such acts, and by then, the perpetrators may be older and less powerful, having already caused significant harm. This is why figures like Ariana Grande and Jennifer Lawrence advocate for immediate steps to protect people working in Hollywood. Lawrence argues that if we can create safe environments for animals during filming, we should prioritize doing the same for humans in such potentially toxic environments. She believes it's crucial to prevent these cases from happening in the first place rather than waiting and hoping they don't occur again in the future.
I mean, there's protections for animals, on filming. I think there need to be protections legally put in place to protect people when they're filming, human beings.
It's way too common for victims to feel guilty about what happened to them, and when they face public backlash, it just makes things worse. This is especially true when the person who hurt them is rich or famous. Sometimes these perpetrators twist the story to make it seem like the victims are just trying to cash in, which totally messes with how people see the situation. Unfortunately, a lot of folks buy into that narrative and jump to defend the offender, completely ignoring or discrediting what the victim has gone through. One person wrote, "Just because a person is successful and wealthy does not mean they are a good person." Another one added, "All that damn money, they think they are untouchable." So far, Spielberg hasn't faced any lawsuits over his alleged crimes. People in Hollywood are definitely talking about it, but no one seems brave enough to take him to court. He's on Epstein's list, and with everything that's come to light, it feels like someone is bound to come forward soon. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.